Hi class, welcome to your first Friday video of the term. Don't forget, every Friday I'm going to be releasing a new video. It'll have lecture in it, new lecture. We're not going to be reviewing what we did this past Tuesday. It's going to continue. And it's also going to have a couple of assignments in it that you'll need to complete by the following Sunday. Deadline is at 11:59 at night. So I released the video Friday early morning, right at midnight, and you'll have all day Friday, all day Saturday, all day Sunday to watch the video and then get the assignments turned in through the Moodle page. If you can, try to watch the videos on Friday. That'll give you enough time on Saturday and Sunday to do the assignments. Really, they're not super long. I don't think you'll have too much trouble getting them accomplished by Sunday night, but honestly, I have had students before wait until like Sunday night at 7 o'clock and go, oh, I'll watch the video now, and then I'll just do my assignments, I'll whip them out. And then I get an email at 11:30 going, I didn't know this would be harder than it is. So just go ahead and try to do it as early as you can. Then you have more of your weekend to enjoy. But this is a part of our hybrid class, the in-person part Tuesday, and then you have this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday is your remote do-it-yourself portion of the class. Enjoy. Well, we haven't had an actual lecture yet in our class. We've talked about the syllabus and we've talked a little bit about public speaking in general. Now it's time to jump in. So let me share my lovely screen. And I have to scratch my nose. Ordinarily, I would not be doing that in the middle of a speech, but I just can't go 30 minutes or however long this video is going to be without scratching my nose, so I'm doing it. Okay, let's get started. Y'all know at the very beginning of every class and every term, the first thing you have to do is define your terms and build the foundational work. So we're going to do the exact same thing in this class. We're going to look at what is exactly public speaking. I'm glad you asked that question. Well, in our modern view, it can be formal or informal speaking to an audience. And the reason I say the modern view, a lot of times when people think about giving a speech or speaking in public, it's a very formal situation, somebody standing up on a stage with a big podium in front of them. And maybe they're like old-fashioned speakers with oratory, giving flair and flashes of gestures and arms and speaking with a big declarative voice, you know. To be or not to be, that is the question. You know, that can be public speaking, but the way we do a lot of public speaking nowadays, it's very much more straightforward. Now, it can still be formal, but we're going to talk a little bit about that. I don't know why my nose is so itchy. Excuse me. You are, though, speaking to an audience. This isn't talking to yourself in a mirror. It's also not speaking to a friend. And that leads to the question, you know, well, what's the difference between public speaking and just having a conversation? Well, that's coming up. One of the things that makes public speaking is that it has a specific purpose. And for our class, we have 4 purposes that we're going to be exploring in our studies. And these are to persuade, to inform, to entertain, and to commemorate or to honor. They're basically synonymous. Now, these aren't the only purposes to have public speaking. We could have to educate. There's lots of other purposes you could have to give a speech, but these are really the ones we're going to be focusing on. And really, most speeches that you will do in your lifetime will fit into one of these categories. So what is the difference between public speaking versus conversation? Well, public speaking tends to be highly structured. It tends to be something you've planned in advance and you have organized, you've gathered information from sources, or you've thought about your own information and your own experiences, and you've put it in a way that takes people through either the information you want to reveal or your argument, or it leads them through your purpose of whatever you want to do. Public speaking also tends to be more formal than conversation, and that makes sense. So if you're having a conversation, a lot of times it's just a free flow of speaking. And I might talk a little bit to my friends, but then they might talk as well. And really the purpose of it is just to share information. It could be to inform, but most of it is just going to be to share and to be friendly and to have a good time. So when I say it also tends to be more formal, it's not like when I'm having a conversation and I'm sitting in my living room and we're all slumping on the couch and, you know, it's just not me standing up revealing the information I have to people in a way that gives me authority and shows respect to my audience. So it tends to be structured, tends to be more formal than conversation. And then the language that we use and the delivery with which we release that language tends to be a lot more formal as well versus conversation. So if I'm talking to a group of my friends, I might have certain words and phrases that we think are funny and humorous and only we know about. They're kind of inside jokes. There might be things that people only in my hometown would understand. You know, there's certain language that we might speak that other people, if they were listening, would be like, I don't know what they're talking about. Also, the way I talk to my friends, I might slur my words, I might use slang, I might cuss a little bit. And I really wouldn't be using those kind of words or that kind of delivery if I was giving a speech. So hopefully this helps you a little bit to understand, you know, then what makes public speaking public speaking. Every time we start a class, we also have to talk a little bit about theory. And so the theory that we're going to look at is the speech communication process. And like everything in biology, in the liberal arts, and whatever you can study, there's always a process. This one's ours. So if you are going to communicate something to someone else, and honestly, this doesn't have to be public speaking, it can be just speaking to anybody. There are certain things you have to have, or certain things that are going to happen that are going to affect how well your communication is transferred. Okay. Now, this is in the book, but hopefully this will break down a little bit to you so you can kind of get the real life perspective of it. So the first thing you have to have, if somebody's going to communicate something to someone else, well, you have to have that somebody who wants to communicate. You have to have a speaker. Now, even though we call them a speaker, this doesn't necessarily mean that they're verbally speaking. They could be waving, you know, that says hello. Any communication that you have targeted towards a listener, you know, that comes from a speaker. So we have a speaker, and then we have someone to whom the message is targeted. Now, the message is whatever the speaker is hoping to convey to the listener, even if it's, now this could be hello, but it also could be look at me. It also could be, I'm trying to get your attention. So, you know, just because this could mean a lot of different things, that doesn't mean it's not a message, or it doesn't mean it's a super specific message. I hope that makes sense. So a speaker sees a listener, and once again, the listener doesn't necessarily have to be listening to receive the message. They could be watching. If I type an email to a listener, you know, they're receiving the message, even though they're not necessarily listening to it. These are just the terms we use to let people know, okay, all the parts of the process. So we have a speaker, has something they want to say or something they want to communicate to a listener. This is our process so far. Now, the way that that message gets communicated is called a channel. So if we have a speaker, if I'm a speaker and I see you and you're my listener and I want to say, hello, how are you doing? And you're standing in front of me and I say, hello, how are you doing? That channel is just my voice. However, in this case, let's say I'm speaking to you through a Zoom meeting and I want to say, be sure you read your chapters. So I'm the speaker. You're still my listener. My message is, I want you to read your chapters. Be sure to read them. And the channel is verbally, but also through the internet. It could be like through video, through the internet. You've got layers of the channel there. So I'm speaking vocally and you can hear me, but it's also going through a video through the internet. Now, why is it important to identify a channel? Well, sometimes the way that you receive a message can be affected by the channel. So if I'm just speaking to you verbally, person to person, and someone else, there's lots of noise around me, you know, me being verbal, I might have to adjust how I say it so you can hear me. If I'm speaking to you through a Zoom meeting, I need to make sure that I'm looking right at my camera. I need to make sure that my microphone is working. There's all sorts of things related to your channel that can affect how well your message gets to your listener. So we've got a speaker, we've got a listener. The speaker has a message. They want the listener to be communicated with, and we want them to understand it. That message goes through a channel. And when the listener obtains that message, they react in ways that give feedback to the speaker. Now, feedback happens even if this listener doesn't do anything. Sometimes just being totally silent and blank is feedback in and of itself. Have you ever talked to somebody and you give them a message and then they're just, you know, that tells you a lot. Did they not hear you? Did they not understand what we were talking about? Did they not agree with you? You know, we expect some sort of response, and the response that we get tells us whether or not our communication has been effective. So there's all sorts of types of feedback. If I tell you, I want you to make sure you read your chapters, and you as a listener say, okay, I will. You know, this tells, okay, you're good with it. You verbally responding to me, that's good feedback, tells me I can probably trust you. Or even if you just go like this, you know, that's feedback. At least I know you heard me. At least I know you understood me, and you've given some kind of affirmative sign. If you do this, you know, that's feedback too. That lets me know, okay, maybe I'm talking about reading the chapters way too much, or maybe you're being sassy, and we need to have a talk about that too. We also can have immediate feedback versus delayed feedback. And delayed feedback happens quite a lot in our internet-related days. Immediate feedback is, as you might expect, it's something that you do, that the listener does immediately, and the speaker understands it, and you can either adjust your communication or follow up to make sure the listener got it, or you can add on to your communication. So if the speaker, me, speaks to you, listener, and says, would you like some ice cream? And you go, you know, okay, that's immediate feedback. That means, yes, let's have some ice cream. If I send you this Zoom video and it was recorded, and I'm still the speaker and you're still the listener, and my message is still, would you like some ice cream? It goes through the channel of my voice, though, through this video, through the internet, and you watch it on Friday. Even though you might watch the video on Friday and I say, hey, if you'd like some ice cream, certainly let me know. You might wait until Sunday. You might send me an email. Yes, I'd like some ice cream. Or you might come in on Tuesday and go, yes, I'd like some ice cream. That's delayed feedback. It doesn't happen instantaneously, and I have to wait to get your response. Now, with regard to like social media and a lot of like email, this sort of thing, a lot of your feedback is going to be in ways that aren't necessarily related to how you move your body or things that are spoken. And quite a lot of times it's going to be delayed. For example, if I make a post on my Facebook page and I say, it certainly is a beautiful day outside, don't you think? So I post it, click. Well, I'm not like looking at my Facebook followers to respond. So already it is going to be delayed. But let's think of all the different ways that my feedback could come. somebody could hit one of the emojis, like a thumbs up. So that is feedback. They saw it, they agree. They could do the angry emoji. Like maybe they're having a bad day and they don't like that I'm being so perky. Or they could write a comment. Well, here where I am, it's raining outside, so I wish I could be where you are. So they could type out a full verbal or worded response instead of just clicking on an emoji. Both of those are forms of delayed feedback. And it's kind of funny with my work, I do a lot of social media, and some days I'll make a post and I'll still be getting comments and people liking or disliking or upvoting or downvoting, days after I've posted. So sometimes I get super delayed feedback. So we've got a speaker who has a message they want to convey to a listener. That message goes through a channel. The listener gives feedback to the speaker. And then we have to deal with interference. Interference is anything that gets in the way of your message or even feedback being delivered from the speaker to the listener or from the listener then to the speaker. Now, interference can come in just a variety of shapes and forms. It can be part of the situation. Perhaps the room is full of people and they're all talking and there's lots of noise going on. So people might have trouble hearing you, right? The room could be totally quiet, but let's say I've been talking for an hour and a half, and in the listener's mind, they're just thinking, I'm so hungry. We've gone way past lunchtime. I can't wait for this to be done. All of that mental talking that's going on in my audience, or if they're tired, their biological processes are telling them, I'm tired, I'm hungry. That's interference as well. If the listener is feeding back to the speaker, we have all this same types of stuff. For example, it can be delayed coming back to me. Or, you might have internet problems. That's interference. Anything that gets in the way of your message being delivered or feedback looping back to you, that's interference, whether it is physical noise or, people acting up in front of you, being distracting, or whether people's own biology, their internal mind thinking, or their biological process is getting in the way. This is something you always have to think about with interference, is sometimes there's not a whole lot you can do about it. Things are just going to happen. So all of this process so far takes place within a situation. And that situation really does play a huge part in how that message goes from the speaker to the listener and what sorts of interference is happening. So like I said, let's say I'm giving a speech to a group of 60 college students, and I'm standing up on a stage and I'm behind a lectern and I'm speaking through a microphone, but the sound system is not great. So people in front probably can hear me, but the people in the back probably don't hear me so well. And you're all sitting in those weird wooden theater seats that are not super comfortable, and they're kind of narrow because this is one of those old school style auditoriums. Plus you got 60 people, we're all sitting right next to each other. Nobody likes to sit super close to each other. So that kind of situation is fraught with peril from a message. So if I'm trying to give like a very serious message, like 2 years ago, it's important for everybody to wear their masks because of COVID-19. Let's say that was my message. And I talked I had an hour-long speech to do it. So I'm still the speaker. Let's say you are in that group of 60 people, but they are all my listeners. My message is, I would like people to wear their masks as much as possible. And I have an hour-long, I talk and talk and talk. My channel is my voice, but it also is going through the microphone. And remember I said your channel can affect how well your message goes out? Well, remember my sound system is not great. So my channel is not helpful and it's putting up some roadblocks In fact, my channel could be said to be causing me some interference. So what other kinds of interference do we have going on in there? Well, we've got that bad sound system. Already talked about that. But my speech is 60 minutes long, which means, can I really expect, this sort of speech to hold everyone's attention for that amount of time? There is going to be a certain point at which everyone's brains are going to be thinking, okay, we get it. Can we move on, please? Remember, the chairs are very hard. Everybody's sitting very close to each other. So we've got some physical considerations as well as some mental considerations that are going to be causing some interference. In addition, I wrote that really long speech. That's on me. But I've interfered with myself. So all of those things are happening. My listeners then are sending me back feedback. Now, what kind of feedback do you think they're sending me back in this case? Well, in the beginning, I might see a lot of faces looking up at me going, they're okay, fine. After about 20 minutes, I might start seeing people kind of looking around. Like, really, is it going to be this long? After about 40 minutes, I'm starting to see some people nodding, or maybe they're chatting and they're causing even more interference because they're talking, or maybe they're on their phones. That tells me I'm losing people. I need to adapt my speech. Maybe I cut it short, or maybe I need to figure out a way to make it super interesting so I can get people's attention again. But I need to also be able to recognize within that situation, okay, I've got issues here I need to overcome either before or while I'm speaking so that I can change that feedback and I can see that people are actually listening to me. So this is our model. This is our process. And why are we talking about it? Well, because every public speaking situation, really any communication situation, but for our purposes, every public speaking situation, if you analyze it according to this model in advance, you can take care of so many issues by thinking, okay, and anticipating, okay, what kind of things should I think about in advance? Well, is my channel going to be effective? What sorts of feedback can I expect? What am I looking for? And what happens? What do I do if I get other feedback, negative feedback? What is the situation going to be like where I'm giving my speech? Is it going to be a positive situation where people are comfortable and they feel good? And, it's going to be a place where people can hear me properly? Or is it going to be dark and we're all scrunched in and it's going to be something? If I can do something about it at that point while I'm still developing my speech, you should do it. So thinking about all of these things while you're building your speech helps you to be prepared for the actual speech situation. So let's take a look at some scenarios and chat about them a little bit. So looking at our model, let's say you're the HR director of your company and you have to explain a new policy to the employees. It's 1 o'clock, just after the lunch break, and everyone is assembled in a large conference room. This policy that you have to convey requires that all staff must wear full business attire every day. And it's not just casual business attire like khakis and like a polo shirt. This is like suit, either a women's dress suit and a men's, pants, jacket, button down, tie situation. So let's break this down. I'm the speaker. My employees are the listeners, and my message is we have a new policy that all staff have to wear full business attire every day. So I'm organizing my speech and I'm thinking, okay, so this message I can already tell is going to be super negative, I think, to all of my employees. So I have to know, okay, as I'm writing my speech, one, I have to know that I'm probably going to have to word this in a way that helps people, understand better, but that, I know I'm already probably going to get some negative feedback during my speech. Like when I start talking about everybody needing to wear a suit, I can expect to see people go, be like, someone might be like, oh, really? I have to be ready for that negative feedback because my message might not be received super positively. We're going to be in the large conference room, and let me see where I work. My large conference room does have, tables, and the chairs are somewhat comfortable. I'll need to make sure I'm standing in a place in the room where everybody at all the tables can see me. And usually if I speak loudly, everyone can pretty much hear me, but I might want to use some sort of microphone sound system just to make sure everybody can hear me. So I might have to have my IT people bring in the microphone, the podium setup. Then I need to think, okay, is this something I want to spend a lot of time on? Okay, so my channel is going to be my voice speaking through the microphone, making sure people can hear it. What sorts of interference can we have? Well, remember I said we're supposed to be speaking at 1 o'clock just after the lunch break? How do you feel right after you've just had a nice lunch? A little sleepy, sometimes you feel like, oh, I could use a nap. So I already know people are going to be coming in from their lunch break. Some people might be refreshed, but some people might be like, ooh, I just ate like a 12-inch foot long, whatever sub. So I'm going to have to make sure I speak in a way that wakes people up and gets their attention. Now, probably once they hear the policy, they will snap to attention, and then I'll see the feedback I get. And perhaps at that point, if I've anticipated well enough, I can respond to it. So do you see how I kind of use this process to figure out how I can organize and develop my scenario in advance? And to kind of start, here's how I need to say this. Here's what I can anticipate. How can I fix my situation before I get in? Those are all important things if you're planning to give a speech. So here's another one. Let's say there's a local politician has set up a news conference to announce their candidacy for state office. And it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So the media have time to write up the story for the 6 o'clock news. And only members of the media and that politician's closest supporters are present at the event on the State House steps. So they're at the Capitol building. You got this local politician wants to announce their candidacy, and it's in the afternoon. So who's the speaker? The speaker's that politician. Who are the listeners? Let's think about these listeners. Immediately, the listeners at the State House steps are going to be members of the media and the politician's closest supporters. You always invite a few fans of your party people to kind of cheer behind you so it sounds awesome when it goes out into the news. So while I'm going to be speaking to those people, and some of them, my supporters already, are going to be very positive, they're going to woo and give me good feedback like that. I have to think about the members of the media. They're going to be writing and shooting with cameras and things while I'm speaking. And I have to make sure that I'm ready for when they question me at the end. Or if I say something and I see them all, looking up, if I say something, I have to make sure I watch for what seems to hit what they write about and what they don't write about. That'll tell me a lot about what they're focused on, what sorts of issues they're probably going to ask me about. But I also have another audience, don't I? I have a delayed reaction audience because those members of the media are going to take my announcement there. They're going to shoot it on video, or they might record it on audio for radio people. And they're going to play it, either clips or the full thing, for another audience, the general broadcast audience. So I have to think about them too. And really, they're the people I'm speaking to. My followers, they know I'm going to be running for office. The media are doing their job. I'm really wanting the people at large, that broadcast audience, to get the message and to understand I'm running for office. I want you to vote for me. Here are my platform planks. So I've got, an immediate audience who's going to be right there in front of me and who I can get immediate feedback from. But I'm going to have this other remote audience who will watch my speech through a totally different channel. While I'm on the State House steps, I'll be speaking and I'll probably have a microphone. But if people are watching at home, it's going to be going from me vocally, but then through either the TV or through the radio. And that's going how they listen. Maybe they're in their car listening while they're listening to the radio. Maybe while they're driving, there's a lot of distractions around them. Are they going to be focused on my message so much? If they're watching at home, What kind of things do they have going on at home that could be distracting? So I still need to figure out how I can make my message so compelling that even if people are home or driving or whatever, that they are compelled to listen to what I'm saying and not pay any attention to those other distractions. So it's also, let me think about the situation. So I'm up on the State House steps. It's going to be in the afternoon because that's a good time, but we're in Georgia and let's say it's sunny. It's going to be hot. So I have to think about, okay, how long do I want to make this speech? Probably not super long. What happens if it rains? Ooh, that's a bad look. So I need to make sure I'm talking to my secretaries and people and make sure I have, bad weather plans. That's something you have to think about quite a lot when it comes to giving a speech. But let's say it's typical spring, summer weather. It's going to be super sunny. And around here, that's 80, 90 degrees. Do I want to give like an hour-long speech? Probably not. That's super long. People get hot. They get tired. Probably want to keep it not short, but not long either. A good like 15, 20-minute announcement, and then maybe answer some questions. You don't want to draw it out. My situation, I'm going to be outside because I'm on the State House steps. So I'm going to have all the noises of outdoors, traffic off in the distance going on, things I have to think about. So I probably will need that microphone system again. So do you see, this is something, for example, if you're a professional speaker, like a politician, you always have to be thinking about this model and all of the different aspects while you're organizing what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. It helps you get rid of possible roadblocks in advance. Let's say I hadn't thought up about any of these things in advance and I just, what, we're going to wing it. We're going to show up at 2:00. We're going to go up to the State House steps. And we're going to send out a news release to all the media and they're going to show up and I'm going to give my speech. Well, let's say I show up on the State House steps and it's raining. Ugh, I should have thought about that in advance, shouldn't I? My situation is totally ridiculous now because not only, do I have to hold an umbrella over my head, but all the media do too. Plus, think of the optics of it. I'm supposed to be having this really positive, fun event and it's just raining on everybody. It's kind of a bad look. Really, it's a negative look. So these are things you have to think about. Plus, what happens if I go and I'm announcing my run for governor or whatever my position I'm trying to run for is. And my followers are like, yay. But the media, they're not writing anything. They're just kind of like, and I'm thinking, okay, they're not thrilled. I need to up my game. But I haven't thought about, okay, what does that mean if I need to take things to a next level? How will I know if I need to cut things short? How will I know if I need to make things longer? I need to really anticipate things in advance, and that's where this process comes in. All right, one more. So in this scenario, you're a parent of 2 young children, and you're addressing your kids' elementary school's PTA with concerns about a new fundraiser, where all the children are required to raise at least $250 each by selling wrapping paper. I made this like third person, but I'll just say it to you. You think the task is too hard for a lot of these kids in these families where every kid, let's say you have 3 kids, you got to raise $750 worth of wrapping paper. Eesh. So, you're going to, I'm sorry, Dr. Pepper time. You're going to be addressing the PTA. And let's think about it in advance so we can, one, feel more confident about ourselves, but so we know what we can expect and possibly figure out how we can best deliver this message. So we feel good about it and we feel like we've been heard properly. So you're the speaker. The listener is everybody else at the PTA, but probably mostly the board, because the board people are the people who make most of the decisions about fund development and that sort of thing. Your message is you want them to reconsider this fundraiser because it's going to be a hardship for a lot of the kids and families. Okay, that's easy enough. So let's think about the channel. You're going to be speaking, but probably you're going to be in an elementary school in one of those cafegimatoriums where people meet, and they tend to be all tile, and they've got those cafeteria tables and things. And it's going to be a lot of moms and dads, and some of them brought the kids, and the kids are young and they don't like being in meetings. So there's probably a lot of room for distractions in there. They might have a microphone system in there. They might not, because it's an elementary school and it's PTA. So you might have to tell yourself, okay, is my voice going to be enough? I'm going to have to prompt myself to be able to speak up. And if my regular speaking voice is kind of low, if I'm not used to doing public speaking a lot, I'm going to have to encounter this idea in advance that I will probably have to raise my voice in order to be heard on this. So that gives me something to prep about, really giving some gusto to my voice. So I'll be speaking about my message to the listeners, and hopefully around me, from the other parents and the kids, the feedback will be positive. Hopefully other parents will agree with what I'm saying, and they might be like, yeah, we agree. This is too hard. Now, if I'm looking at the board members and the fund development people, though, they might be like, okay, we hear you. We've already decided pretty much. So if I'm thinking, okay, the people behind me, it might be okay, but the people I have to persuade are the board people. Let's say my feedback just comes back negative. I really need to make sure my argument is good. And it really kind of whips up the people behind me so that the board realizes there are too many people who are against this for them really to go through with it. So I have to be careful with how I structure my argument. And I need to be able to give good examples and information that really gets people with me, really showing their support for what I'm saying. So I thought about the feedback. What kind of interference? Well, I'm in a Catholic gymatorium. It's going to be noisy. There's going to be a lot of people in there. You got kids running around possibly. So I need to make sure that what I'm saying is, one, loud enough to be heard, but also compelling enough that everyone will pay attention to me. Okay. So this one wasn't like, it's not like it's a professional speech, but it's one of those everyday speeches that sometimes in our lives we have to give, or we feel compelled to give. And even in those kind of situations, it's a good idea to take a look at the model and break everything down so that we know what to expect, or we know what to anticipate, and we can cut down some of those challenges and give ourselves options in case something pops up that's unexpected. All right. Phew. Now we can move on. Not too much, though. We do have an assignment that's going to be based on that. So hold on. We're moving on to ethics and ethical public speaking. Now, at Georgia Military College, ethics is a big deal. And all of the classes will discuss ethics and how it involves the topic for that term. Whatever that class is, there's always an ethical component, and here is ours. So first of all, what are ethics? Well, ethics are behaviors that are based on well-understood standards of right and wrong. Essentially, they are guidelines for what people ought to do according to the members of a society's rights, obligations, and fairness. Things to remember: that different groups of people have different ideas of what is right and what is wrong. So we might say, well, I grew up thinking that this is right and this is wrong. And so everybody does. Well, not everybody does. For example, the way we live in America and our system of government and our ethics that informs our government and our society is going to be quite different from the ethics and the government that is informed by those ethics in many other countries. They just would have different value systems. So just because we have certain standards for the way we think we should be acting and we should be respectful of others, we can't assume that everybody in the world has that same type of ethical thinking. Nonetheless, within our American society, at least specifically, there are certain standards that we all hold self-evident, so to speak. For example, in our Constitution, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, those are all standards that we think people have a right to. And if you're an American, we can all believe in that. And if what you're doing reflects that we respect people's rights to those things, then you're acting ethically. All right, so when it comes to public speaking, there are some things we have to think about. What is ethical public speaking? Well, it's presenting information and arguments with the belief that the members of a group or society with whom you live should be treated with integrity, and that the information should be to your audience's benefit and not to their detriment. So it is being respectful of your audience, being straightforward and treating them fairly, letting them be able to make decisions on their own, and letting them have all the information they can so that they can make informed decisions that benefit them and not detriment them. Sometimes things benefit us and not other people, and we're like, hey, as long as it benefits me, I'm good with that. That is unethical. If you're wanting to be ethical, we want everybody to have the option to make their own decisions based on as much information as we can. At least that's what we think ethically in the United States nowadays. Do people act ethically? Ooh, that's a whole other question. Sometimes people do, sometimes people don't. So, what are some difficulties that we might have if people are speaking publicly and we have to think about the ethics of things? Well, a lot of times, if we're speaking professionally, like for a government or a corporation, a business or organization's goals usually prioritize the organization and its funding first, its reputation first, and then its customers and or the public. So, for example, if I work for a large corporation and I need to give a speech, I need to think about how is my speech. One, I'd like to make sure I give people all the information they need to know about my group, to know about my organization and whatever we're trying to sell. I need to make sure that I'm respectful of my audience, but I have to also think about the effect that my speech is going to have upon my business, the corporate body that I work for. Some information that happens within my corporation, I don't want really people to know. They would think differently. They would think in a way that I would not want people to think of my business, maybe, so does it mean we share all the information? Well, I don't know. How much information? There's the difficulty. What happens if my business has some legal trouble and then later I have to go talk about, our product? Do I mention the stuff going on behind the scenes? Maybe, maybe not. But that's the difficulty with ethical public speaking. You always have to be thinking, how much information needs to be shared with people when I give a presentation, whether it's to the general public or specific people. How does the information affect our image? And what are the costs of being ethical versus unethical? If what I say can bring my whole business down and I lose my job and a lot of other people lose their jobs and then the economy is just bad, was that worth the cost of me being completely honest to people? Is being unethical ever a good thing? Some people would say no, that it's always the right thing to be ethical. But then you have to think, okay, let's say I don't give all the information, but all the information I do give is honest. And the information that I do give is pertinent to the issue at hand. The information I don't share is not necessarily pertinent to the issue at hand. Is that ethical? Well, this is where it gets wiggly, doesn't it? And it's where people have to make a lot of everyday choices. So let's say you or me, we're PR representatives for a pharmaceutical corporation. Once again, we're with a corporate entity, but this could be a government. This could be any group, really. The Girl Scouts, the Boy Scouts, let's say. But in this case, we're representatives for a pharmaceutical corporation. And it's been determined that an ingredient in our popular anti-inflammatory drug may be linked to an increased chance of developing types of liver cancer. Well, that's not good, isn't it? And we have to develop some messaging because this has just been determined. So what are some things we have to think about? Well, what are our ethical concerns here? Who do we have responsibilities to? Well, we've got some ethical concerns here. For example, all the people who take this drug, it might be said that it's important that they know about this ingredient so that they can make an informed decision about whether they want to keep taking the drug or not. Being open and honest and saying, hey, you know, that we've just determined that this ingredient Z, may be linked to an increased chance of developing types of liver cancer. If you have a family history of liver cancer, this might be something you want to talk to your doctor about. You know, is that an ethical speech? I think a lot of people would think it is. However, is it good just to say that? Do we need to say more? How do we need to say that? You know, if you watch a lot of these commercials nowadays, they do all of the disclaimers in that super fast voice, which is like, some people who take this medication may be found to have, you know, certain types of tremors, and they give all the possible side effects included. But so honestly, you can't understand what they're saying. Now they're following the letter of the law and they're being out there, they're saying them, but they say them in a way that it's a lot of times hard to understand. And sometimes when you hear it, you're like, wait, did she say something about bedwetting? Or, you know, whatever. You're like, I totally spazzed on that. Dang, what happened? So sometimes companies, you know, is that good enough ethics? Who do I have responsibility to? Well, I like working for my pharmaceutical firm. I mean, they pay me. I like being paid. I like paying my bills. And let's say that if a whole bunch of people decide not to take this drug anymore, they've had that honest conversation to their doctors, and we lose a huge portion of our sales. What does that mean for my company? You know, are people going to be put out of jobs? Are we going to lose market share? What's our reputation going to look like? Are we going to start getting media calling us going, you know, why are you giving people liver cancer with your drugs? You know, or what are you doing in the meantime? I do have a responsibility to my business, but I have a business to my community. I have a responsibility to my community as well. So I hope while we're talking about ethics and while we're giving our speeches through this whole term, and honestly throughout your life, every time you hear a speech that causes you to think, well, wait a minute, is that right? I want you to think about these ethical sorts of things. And, you know, sometimes people are following the letter of the law. Sometimes people are doing what they have to do, but is that enough? Should they be doing more? Should they be willing to accept responsibility over and above? You all probably are not old enough to remember this, but I am, because I'm old. In the 80s, the people who made Tylenol had a situation where, this is before they put that foil seal on bottles of medicine that you would buy over the counter. And it had been discovered that someone had tainted a huge lot of Tylenol, and people were taking them and it was killing them. They had poisoned Tylenol. And what Tylenol ended doing, you know, they knew what the lot was, but they took that lot out. But really what they ended up doing was basically shutting everything all down altogether. And they were very transparent. They came up and said, you know what, we've discovered this. It's a bad situation. We're going to take all the Tylenol off the shelves right now. We think we know it's this lot, but we're not exactly sure. We don't want to take any chances with any people's health. We know this is going to be done at substantial cost to ourselves, but we're going to figure out how to get around this. And they took all the Tylenol off the shelves, and what they started putting that foil seal. So you have to now pop it open before you take your medicines out of the bottle. And with that, they put the Tylenol back on the shelves, and they're perfectly good right now. Now, they did take a financial hit, but their reputation really stayed quite strong because they addressed things head on. They didn't try to hide it. They knew they had a problem, and they found the person, I think, or the people who had tainted the batch. But they also pointed out that there was a flaw in the manufacturing process. There was a safety issue, you know, and that's why we have those foil caps, so that medicines that are over the counter can't be tainted, or you can see right away if something has happened to them. So some good came out of the situation, even though they did take a financial hit, but it was because they were ethical. Hopefully that's a good example. So before we move on, I've got a couple of videos. I'm going to show you some ethical video stuff here. Let me stop sharing my screen and I can pull up this other one. And then I'm going to give you your assignments. So gosh, this has been a long time, hasn't it? So I'm going to talk about this. This is Ken Lay, and this is a video that was made in 2009. Ken Lay was the CEO of a company called Enron, and they were an energy producer in California. Now, if you want to go study the Enron, scandal, you can. Basically, what happened was a lot of people, high ups behind the scenes, were manipulating things. They were embezzling money out. And at this point where he's giving this speech, he's talking to employees. They are being investigated by the government because the government has been tipped off. They're looking into it, and it certainly looks like things are bad for the guys at Enron. So he's talking to employees, and the purpose of his speech is to reassure them that things are fine. Everything is good. We might be being investigated, but we're going to come out of this strong. So he looks okay. I'm going to fast forward through this. I think there are some point. Yes, these are people. Look at their feedback though. Are they buying it? They are still very concerned with what he's saying. And the reason that they're concerned and the reason that he is pushing this message so hard is because part of their compensation came in the form of stock options. So he doesn't want them to all lose all faith in their system and start selling their stocks. That's already kind of happened out in the general public. And the stock price has actually started dropping significantly in the meantime. So if they start selling their stocks, they're not worth at all what they used to be. And this is a lot of people's retirement funds. So he's trying to tell them, stick it out. We're going to be fine. This is nothing to worry about. You want to in fact buy more stock, because when this rebounds, you're going to be in a much better place. Now, this is an unethical speech. This is a great example of an unethical speech because he is involved in all of that illegal mishmash. He knows exactly what the government is investigating. So he might be trying to tell himself this is going to be fine. We can totally control it. But if you had a friend, let's say, and you knew that problems were going on and that they stood, if things go badly, to lose all of their retirement, would you tell them, no, keep the course. We're totally good. Everything's fine. I'm fine. I assure you, like I said, you saw those people. They're all concerned. He's talking to all of these people who are super concerned they're going to lose all their retirement money. And he's like, no, this is not a problem. In fact, we've got all of these qualities that we stand for in Enron, and we're going to come out of this bigger and better than before. So he has knowledge of all this stuff, one, that they're guilty, but he's trying to get them to think, no, we're going to be fine. This is going to be great. He doesn't want them to sell because that's going to affect the stock price even more. So his ultimate goal is not, at the best interest of this audience. So he's talking very unethically. What happens? I'll just go ahead and spoiler alert. The federal investigation totally tanks Enron. They discover everything. The business goes out of, Enron just basically has to declare bankruptcy. All the stock drops to nothing. All of these people lost everything unless they sold. But a lot of these people basically had to go to their desks, take everything out of their desks and leave the building. That was that kind of a thing. And they had nothing. See, look, he's getting through to somebody. He's making them laugh. Even an unethical speaker can be a good one. But ultimately, so many of these employees are going to be out of work and have no retirement money because of their stock options. Their retirement was in the stock and it goes to zero. So that is an example of an unethical speech. Who else do we have? Oh, we've got Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon, former president of the United States. Hopefully you've heard something about the Watergate scandal. So let's talk about Richard here. This is his Watergate speech, and it's a famous speech, even though it's not super long. If you want to watch it at some point, it's 5 minutes long, but I won't make you watch it here. So basically, if you're unfamiliar with Watergate, he's running for re-election, and he's a Republican, and there is a Democratic candidate. And as happens in all elections, his campaign to re-elect the president, which comes to creep, it was interesting. You're always trying to find something you can say that's negative about the other guy. So members of this campaign committee break in to offices for the Democratic National Committee at the Watergate Hotel in Washington, D.C., and look through papers trying to find something, some kind of dirt they can throw up at this campaign, you know, something they can bring up that'll slam them and bring Richard Nixon back. Well, breaking into offices is illegal, and it gets found out because they weren't the best, you know, burglars. But here's the thing, is if Richard Nixon, you know, while he wasn't involved with the break-in, he does know about it. People tell him about it. And eventually he does have to make this speech to the American people. So he basically is going through the history. Here's the situation with the Watergate break-in so far. I have had no knowledge of this. I gave nobody any, you know, authority to do anything like this. Nobody in my campaign I have any reason to think would do anything like this. This must be somebody else, or this is a setup. See, he doesn't think anyone, none of them were any involved at all. Okay, so it's dishonest, which usually dishonestly points to unethical every time. He wants to be reelected, and just to come out and say, you know what, I had people on my committee who broke into the Democratic National Committee's offices. It's not going to go well. It's going to look bad. And so he knows this. He's trying to cover it up. He thinks they can cover it up. Back in the 70s, we didn't have media as pervasive as it is now. We didn't have social media, especially. So he's thinking, we can contain this, we can control it. And in addition to making this speech, they also do interesting things, like in his office. I don't know if you know this, but the president's office always has a recorder going anytime the president meets with somebody or is on the phone, because a president's conversations they're privileged, but they're always recorded because of the nature of his position. And it had been determined later, people were like, well, wait, it's been brought out that he did know about this and he worked to cover it up. That is illegal. So, well, when did he know it and who did he talk to? They went to the tapes and found out somebody had cut out about 20 minutes worth of tape from the tapes. So if you ever hear people talking about Nixon and the missing tape, that's what they're talking about. So he ends up having to resign from the presidency as a result of all of this. But with regard to this speech, unethical, I think we can say it is. Boy, I'm talking a lot tonight. So let's say goodbye to Richard Nixon. We have one more example. And this is a more recent example. This is BitBoy Crypto. So nowadays, you have a lot of guys talking on YouTube, streaming, whatever. And in this particular case, this is a guy who's done very well buying cryptocurrency. He actually, I think, lives in the Atlanta area and is a crypto millionaire. And he's got his channel here on YouTube where he every day convinces people to buy cryptocurrency, but also tries to advise them in the way to go. Is this a problem? Not yet. So what was happening this past fall was they kept saying that, well, one of the main coins is called Bitcoin. It kind of drives all the other coins. And it had been predicted earlier on in the year that a Bitcoin was going to hit about $50,000 per Bitcoin before the end of the year. And if you bought fractions of Bitcoins, you know, it would just keep going up and up and up and up, and you would just totally make money. Well, here, this is December 23rd, and things are shaky. It's not anywhere close to that 50,000 point. But he's still, in this video, trying to persuade people, this is very much a Ken Lay kind of moment, that it's still going to go as they say, to the moon. So he's giving all this information, and I'm gonna say he's talking and talking, and he's showing all sorts of graphs and charts. You know, in recent days, yeah, it's gone down, but look, it's going a little bit up here. So you can't look at the little short things. You have to look at the long history. Just buy more crypto, buy more Bitcoin, and when before the end of the year it goes through the roof, you will thank me. Now, why would he do this? Why wouldn't he just give unbiased information? You know, then he can still be ethical. He'd be like, you know, honestly, I don't know the way this is going to go. Here's what I'm going to do. But, you know, this is like playing the stock market, and you have to know that you're taking a risk like you would in any kind of situation. Why would he just say that? Well, he's got two reasons. One, he's got a lot of cryptocurrency. So if people are buying it, that's good for him. So he needs to persuade people to keep buying cryptocurrency. The other thing is he gets paid to make these videos. He's got sponsors, and he's on YouTube. He gets a certain percentage based on all the people that watch his video. So it's in his best interest to be a hype guy, to pump people up and to get them interested in crypto. And whenever things are going down, people are not excited. So he needs to always be letting people know, hey, things are going up. It's a good thing. Got to keep positive. In that, you know, he is advising people to go against something which is probably in their best interest. Their best interest at this point is just kind of hold, you know, because nothing is going to the moon. He doesn't know. Cryptocurrency is still a very new situation. And ultimately, as of like January, I think it was still going down. People lost money. Now, we're kind of in an offset season for cryptocurrency. Eventually, it will go back up. And most people, I think, are just holding at this point. But at this point, you know, he was like, keep buying, because it'll go up. It's going to go up immediately. It didn't, you know, and he could always go and say, you know, here's my thing. You know, he could always go back and go, it was my prediction, you know, and it should have gone up, but, you know, he can always backtrack. So it's kind of unethical because in people's, if he was being honest, he should have just said, you know, here's what I'm doing. It may be in your best interest just to not do anything. But instead, he's just telling people, keep buying, keep buying, keep buying. So anyhow, all right, I'm going to stop sharing. Stop share. And I'm going to pull back up my screen. We're going to talk about one more thing before we go on to our assignments. Plagiarism. So this is an ethical problem. Plagiarism is the practice of taking someone else's work or ideas and passing them off as one's own. Now, I'm sure you hear about plagiarism a lot. Probably heard about it in high school. You're going to hear about it again in college. It is bad. There are 4 types of plagiarism. First, you have global or direct plagiarism, where you basically just take someone's words. Those are mine, when you didn't originally say them. You take the whole bit and that's all me. That's global or direct plagiarism. Patchwork or mosaic plagiarism is where you take bits of what someone else has said, not the whole thing, because that's nowadays it's too easy to find. But if you take a sentence here and a sentence there and a sentence here, and I put those together, none of those sentences are originally from me, but they're all from someone else. But maybe I can try to get away with that. And that's patchwork, because it's like building a patchwork quilt, kind of. Self-plagiarism comes, and it's kind of a weird thing, but you do get some academics and people who do this. It's where you published something or you printed something years ago, and then you just kind of bring it back and be like, oh, it's new, here it is again. Where you're basically plagiarizing yourself, trying to pass it off as something new. And I don't expect any of y'all are going to do that. Although my brother did in elementary school. He wrote a book report in 4th grade and then just used that same book report in 5th and 6th grade, the same book, same report, just turned it in year after year. He self-plagiarized. And then accidental plagiarism. This is interesting because it's still plagiarism, because it's technically not your own ideas, but it's something where you read something or you've heard something, and then later you don't realize it's not your real thought. But yeah, have you ever done that? And I know I have, where you've heard an idea from somebody and then you're talking to someone and this idea just comes in your head and you, hey, here's this. And they're like, ooh, that's a really good idea. Well, it wasn't really yours to start with. This happens a lot in music where someone will write a song and it'll have a really distinctive melody line. And then someone will pop up and say, you know, that's identical to the melody line of this song, which was made in the 70s. And people listen to them and go, ooh, that really is. And then later you find out the musician's like, you know, I remember hearing that song and I totally forgot about it. And then I wrote this song. I like that melody line so much, I thought it was mine. That actually happens a lot. They didn't mean to, but they still plagiarized. So when we are an ethical public speaker, we need to ask ourselves, are the goals that I have for my speech ethical? Have I done enough preparation to ensure I know enough to speak fully about what I'm talking about? And have I presented my issue or my argument ethically? And then, this is a big one, and we're going to talk about this a lot in coming weeks. Do I cite the sources that I use? Are all the ideas that I say mine actually mine? All right. Whew. It's time for the remote exercises. This is probably the longest lesson that we're going to have that's a Friday video. Let me move me so you can actually see this. Here we go. So this first remote exercise, the speech communication process in real life situations. Woo! So what are we going to be doing? Well, this one is going to be due Sunday night by 11:59. I'm just going to say this as many times as it takes. So you're going to put it in a Word document. At the top of all the Word documents you turn into me, I would like you to put these three things. Put your name, Communication 201, and the date. That way, if something happens and I just have this file, I can see it's you and you're related to this class. Then this assignment, I want you to write about 4, count them 4, speech communication experiences you've had in your life. And for each, I want you to bullet point each part according to the speech communication process. I want you to give who the speaker was, who the listener or the audience was, who the message, what the message was, what the channel was. And if it's like a 2 or 3 part channel, I want you to put that in there. I want you to have a bullet for the feedback that existed. I want you to put a bullet for the interference that existed. And usually there's more than one type of interference. And then I want you to have a bullet for the situation. Now, when it comes to the situation, I don't want you just to say, like, it was a room. For a lot of you, for example, we've all given speeches before in class. And so if one of these examples you decide to use, it's going to be a classroom speech, that's perfectly good. But I don't want you to say for situation, it was a classroom. Because there's all sorts of different types of classrooms. You know, there are huge lecture halls. There are smaller rooms like ours. Ours has a lot of tech in it. Some don't. Some classrooms are real small that only like 5 or 6 people sit around a round table in. You know, describe the situation. So for these 4 speech communication experiences, 1 should pertain to a public speaking situation. 1 experience should pertain to a verbal conversation. Remember, conversation, not necessarily a public speech, haha. 1 experience should pertain to an e-communication. So it could be an email, could be a social media post, could be anything. And then 1 experience should pertain to a communication that was nonverbal. Ooh. So I want you to write about 4 speech communication experiences you've had in your life. Only 1 pertains to a public speaking situation. And if you talked about it in class this past Tuesday, it doesn't count. You got to pick another one. But I want you to make sure you bullet all of the parts of that speech communication process for all 4 of these experiences. Write it up in a Word document, save it, turn it in on our Moodle page. Okay, that's the first one. Second one, moving me a little bit, ethical and non-ethical public speaking examples. I showed you a bunch of non-ethical public speaking examples. So I want you to go to the internet. Usually YouTube is the best place, but there's other places you can find links. And I want you to find 1 example of someone who's giving an ethical public speech. And then I want you to find 1 example of someone who's giving a non-ethical public speech. Ooh, this is going to be tough. So in a second Word document, don't turn these assignments in on the same Word document because you need 1 for each link. In your Word document, remember, you're going to put your name, your class, the date in it. But then I want you to put in the person in each of the speeches, both the ethical and the non-ethical one, and the link so I can see it too. So for example, if the person giving a speech is John Smith and John Smith gave an ethical public speech, I would put like number 1, John Smith, ethical public speech, and then I would copy the link to his speech and put it next to it. Then you can bullet down, explain why you think this speech was ethical or non-ethical for the other guy. You know, what was John's goals? Was the information presented ethically sound? Why? How did their delivery contribute to the ethics of their case? The delivery is how they express themselves. How did their use of language contribute to the ethics of their case? What were the word choices they used that made you think, okay, they have my best interest in mind, or this guy, you know, he's basically telling a fib, but he's trying to make it sound good with his word choices. And then was the speaker successful at making the case or giving their argument or explaining whatever they were trying to explain? So for each one, the non-ethical and the ethical public speech, you're going to put the name, you're going to put the link, and then you're going to answer those 5 questions. What were their goals? Was the information ethically sound? Sometimes it can be a little mixture, but that's hard. You just pick one that's ethical and one that's non-ethical. How did their delivery shape whether or not you thought you could listen to what they were talking about, or whether you thought, ooh, this is unethical? How did their use of language contribute? And then was the speaker successful at making their case or giving the argument or whatever they're doing? Once again, Word document, submit by Sunday night at 11:59. Whew, that was a long class, wasn't it? Now you've got homework to do. So email me, text me, call me if you have any questions. But honestly, I think you have all the information you need. You shouldn't have any trouble. Hope you have fun with these assignments. Be careful. Have a good weekend. And I will see you on Tuesday. Stay safe. Bye.